As we come to the end of Genesis, you are going to be introduced to the Joseph novella. Jacob had all of those sons, right? And just because this is a drama, we've got one son, Joseph, who is an irritating, sniveling little brat. And he makes all of his brothers jealous of him, and he just so happens to be Jacob's favorite, so that the brothers sell him into slavery, and Joseph ends up in Egypt. So already you should be saying, my heavens, what is going on here? How is God going to make this promise come to fruition in light of all of this dysfunction? Well, Joseph ends up in Egypt, and he rises to prominence in Egypt, and he becomes the second in command to a really important guy named Potiphar. But he lands himself in jail when he's wrongfully accused of rape by Potiphar's wife. And so again, you've got to say, my gosh, how is God going to bring this promise to fruition? Well, another snag comes along. Eventually, Joseph gets out of prison for this rape that he didn't commit, and he rises again to prominence until he's second in command to the Pharaoh. When he is second in command to the Pharaoh, he has a number of dreams that indicate to him that there is going to be a famine, not only in Egypt, but also in the land of Canaan. And so he begins to develop a plan to stockpile a bunch of food, a bunch of grain, so that people can live through, so that all of Egypt can live through this famine. Well, lo and behold, his brothers, the children of Jacob, who have been living in Canaan, they begin to suffer under this famine, and they don't know what's become of Joseph at all. And so they travel to Egypt because they hear that there is grain there, and it's there that they interact with Joseph. This is supposed to be Joseph, and are reunited with him, and he forgives them for the wrongdoing of selling him into slavery because he was a little jerk. And they're reunited in that way. And you're kind of like, okay, this is kind of a good thing as far as the promise goes. But you need to keep in mind that even though we've now got the band back together, or the descendants back together, they're now no longer in Canaan. They didn't own the land to begin with, and that was a problem. But now they're not even in Canaan. And so if you're asking about that covenant with Abraham, land, descendants, and a blessing, you don't have the land anymore, because when the band gets back together, when the brothers are reunited, they stay in Egypt. And so the way that the story ends, the way that Genesis ends, is with the people of God living in Egypt. They've got descendants, but they don't have the land. And so we've got this continuing drama of how will God bring about this covenant with Abraham? How will it actually take place? Kind of the marker of this whole Joseph novella, though, it comes in Genesis 50 when Joseph is speaking with his brothers, and he says, even though you wanted to do me harm, God intended it for good, to save many people. Because Joseph was in Egypt, he knew to save up the grain so that a lot of people would be spared during the famine. So you end on this kind of mixed note. The covenant with Abraham is definitely in question. We have the descendants piece, but we don't have the land. And are you really blessed if you only have one or the other? So that's where we leave off the story of Genesis, and we'll pick back up in Exodus.